Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I want to recognize the members of my team who are with us here today. Our City Administrator, Chris Shorter, our Fire Chief, Niles Ford, our Police Commissioner, Michael Harrison, Housing Commissioner, Alice Kennedy, Deputy Mayor Leach. Oh, no, Deputy Mayor Leach not here yet. Director of Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Shantae Jackson. City Solicitor Shea, Deputy Solicitor Thompson. Welcome aboard, ma'am. And we are here today to show that we are unified as Baltimore City government in our efforts to tackle the risk and blight that vacant properties pose to our communities. There are 15,032 vacant houses in Baltimore City. About 13,560 of those vacant properties have private owners. And although approximately 1/3 of the vacant buildings are already under a transformation, being rehabbed by a private owner, part of a larger redevelopment plan, in court under a vacant building receivership action, being prepared for demolition, or a city-owned vacant property available for immediate sale to a qualified buyer ready to rehab, we know that we must do more to address this issue. We know that these vacant properties reduce property values, increase blight, attract crime, and pose a nuisance to neighboring properties. Last week, a privately owned vacant house on the 200 block of South Stricker Street caused a horrific building collapse that left 3 firefighters dead and 1 seriously injured. My heart continues to be with the families of Lieutenant Paul Buttram, Lieutenant Kelsey Sadler, and firefighter paramedic Kenny Lacayo. To honor their lives and tackle the challenges that vacant properties pose to our residents and neighborhoods, I am issuing the following directive to all, and I do mean all, members of my administration. Within the next 30 days, provide a full accounting of every effort that city departments and agencies are already engaged in to reduce the number of vacants. I am also tasking them to be innovative and provide ideas for what more their respective agencies can do to reduce the number of vacants in the city. The Department of Housing and Community Development, under Commissioner Kennedy, has ongoing initiatives in place to acquire and convert, stabilize, or demolish these vacant houses. This directive aims to accelerate, expand, and enhance these processes and reduce the number of vacant homes in Baltimore City. And while we are talking about Commissioner Kennedy and Housing's work, I really want to thank the Commissioner and the entire Department of Housing and Community Development for the great work that they do each and every day around vacant homes in the city. You can see the neighborhoods that they have worked with communities to bring back to vacants, from vacants to be neighborhoods that are now seeing homeowners, that you can see the work that they do each and every day. And Commissioner, I want to thank you. This is one of the most consequential undertakings of my administration. There is too much at stake to leave a single recommendation off the table. This is a top priority and ties directly into 2 of our action plan priority pillars, both equitable neighborhood development and ensuring clean and healthy communities. I also would say that this is also about building public safety. Goal 2.2 of the equitable neighborhood development pillar is to identify and stabilize vacant structures adjacent to occupied properties to prevent additional vacancies, stabilize communities, and attract new homeowners to Baltimore's neighborhoods. This is about operationalizing our commitment, and anything less than our very best attempt at solving the problem would be a discredit to the lives of the brave firefighters we lost last week and the residents who we serve day in and day out, who have been dealing with this issue for more than 3 decades. We are going to take the results of this 30-day review to develop an ambitious and comprehensive set of goals to reduce the number of vacants, both through tackling existing vacant properties and preventing additional vacancies, which will build on existing efforts to prevent property from turning into vacants, such as reforming the city's tax sale process and addressing existing vacants. HCD's Vacants to Values program that we all know, our work to reform the disposition process, and current public-private initiatives to bridge the appraisal gap on vacant properties and rebuild blighted communities. Like the $2 million from J.P. Morgan Chase that was announced last week to groups like Parity Homes, doing this work with with, and I'll say again, with, not for our residents. To jumpstart these efforts, in the coming weeks, we will make an announcement putting American Rescue Plan funds towards tackling vacant problems and blight in our most underserved communities. On top of financial investment, there are several other tools in our toolkit. We will look at legislative and procedural changes necessary to accelerate this work and forge new partnerships to shorten the time it takes to condemn and requisition privately owned vacant properties. Thank you, and now I will turn it over to Commissioner Kennedy first. Madam Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to provide my continued thoughts and prayers to the families of our fallen firefighters. We continue to hold space for you as you navigate this tremendous time of grief. And to Chief Ford and the Baltimore City Fire Department, we are here with you as you mourn the loss of your colleagues and friends. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the increased focus you are bringing on the issue of vacant buildings in Baltimore City. I was encouraged when you elevated this issue under your equitable neighborhood development, clean and healthy communities, pillar goals, and our public safety pillar goal as well. And I believe this expanded focus and charge for all agencies to take an inventory of ways we can have a coordinated response will be fruitful. For decades, vacant and abandoned buildings have presented a challenge for our city. We are not alone in this. Many cities across the country face the same challenge. First rooted in population decline, with Baltimore going from being the 6th largest city in America several decades ago to just around 600,000 residents. As people left, this created a growing inventory of vacant and abandoned homes. Coupled with decades of disinvestment in our neighborhoods, rooted in redlining and racist housing policies, complications from tangled title issues, long-held properties by non-responsive investors. All of these things exacerbate the vacancy situation in our city and makes it quite complicated in some ways to address. The city has been working for decades to hold derelict property owners accountable. We utilize code enforcement, private acquisition, property donation, condemnation, receivership, tax lien foreclosure, in rem tax lien foreclosure, stabilization, and demolition as all tools in our toolbox to combat vacancy. We've also been guiding targeted disinvestment in long disinvested areas. We have made progress, but there is more to do. Our progress has been through our impact investment area, community planning work with our communities, work with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and Director Jackson, the Department of Planning, the Law Department, the State of Maryland, and other stakeholders. And I don't want that progress to be lost in this discussion as we look forward. Together, we have begun to unlock the potential in many neighborhoods, and we are on the brink of having the lowest number of vacant properties in the city in decades. But what happened last week in a privately owned and vacant building in our city should never happen. And the time is now, under Mayor Scott's leadership, to act further, to leave no stone unturned as we do this work. I've spoken with Chief Ford directly. Our teams will be working over the next couple of weeks to mutually identify additional policy changes to present to CEO Shorter as part of today's directive. In addition to policy changes and doing everything we can to hold property owners accountable, a key area of focus for me as commissioner is also prevention. In other words, we are striving to do everything we can to support existing homeowners to prevent new vacancies from coming about, even as we continue our work to address the current vacancies we face. You have my commitment, Mr. Mayor, and my team's commitment that we will do everything we can, utilize every tool in our toolbox to combat the vacancy we have, prevent future vacancy, and take properties and put them back into productive use. Preventing blight, reducing blight, eliminating blight as needed so that we do not experience the tragedy that we experienced last week.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I'll turn it over to Chief Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, thank you for elevating this concern to one of the highest priorities of your administration. Also, Commissioner, Thank you for your work. Thank you for your partnership in this endeavor. We are in concert in this effort. Our goal is to make this community, certainly to reduce blight or get rid of blight altogether, but certainly to create an environment that's safe for the firefighters to work and do their jobs. Our goal is to make sure that we never, ever have the same circumstance that happened this past week happen again. Not just in our career and our tenure, but those as our sons and daughters follow us in taking on the jobs that we have, that they won't have the same circumstances that we have. So we're working really hard together in unity, trying to create synergy as we work together as several departments to try to make sure this doesn't happen again. And as I said, Mayor, I want to thank you again. This is extraordinarily important, extraordinarily close to me. I spoke to John today, this morning. John is the survivor that was involved in the incident. He is doing well, and his spirit is good. But I also want to make sure we remember and keep in prayer the families of our 3 fallen members. Thank you again, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Ford. We will continue to do everything that we can to support our fire department, our brave firefighters, and most importantly, the families of the courageous men and women that we lost last week. And before we open up for a few questions, and I'm going to bring Commissioner Harrison up in a second, I'd like to talk about some of the violence that took place over the weekend and what we're going to continue to do and what BPD has been doing and Monty has been doing to combat this disease. But we had a 66-year-old man murdered at home over the weekend. And I think that's something that we all should talk about. And what I want first and foremost, the individual or individuals that committed this act to know is that we will find you and we will bring you to justice, because we will not accept that our seniors can become prey for whatever reason, for whatever happened. We have to make sure that we're valuing their lives and all lives across our city. But we will not stop. And I know the great women and men of BPD continue to work hard every day with that one focus, and that's to bring people to justice and get folks off the street who want to commit and continuously commit acts of violence. We know that they did that this weekend. I'll let the commissioner go into the details to include 2 arrests for murder. We will continue to go after these individuals, remove their weapons off our streets. Our violence interrupters have already interrupted over 50 incidents that would have ended in violence in Baltimore were it not for their actions. The police department has already made over 100 gun arrests in just 1 month of the year. We are going to continue to be focused on what we have to do, and that's to remove people who are committing violent acts off the streets of Baltimore and working with our partners in the other portions of the criminal justice system to make sure that they're held responsible quickly and certainly. Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And of course, we saw the violence over the weekend where we had 1 homicide and 4 non-fatal shooting incidents. But we also made, as you heard the mayor say, 2 arrests for murder, 2 arrests for attempted murder, 5 arrests for armed robbery. 3 of those arrests were the same individual who had multiple counts of armed robbery. We made 11 handgun arrests out there, to a total of 58 total arrests. So the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department are extremely proactive and continue to do their job by aggressively and relentlessly pursuing those individuals who commit violence. The department works around the clock to solve these crimes, to make arrests, and to improve the quality of life in our city. We continue to work with our area law enforcement partners to increase visibility in our communities and working with our community organizations to identify and apprehend all violent offenders. Those who commit these violent acts will be caught and will be held accountable, and we will use all of our resources at our disposal to ensure the safety of our Baltimore residents. The violence must stop, and we need everyone's support to achieve the sustainable reductions of violence in our city. And so I certainly join the mayor in commending the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department for their dedication and for their sacrifice. They continue to show up every day to serve and protect our city. If you have any information related to any cases, even the cases over this weekend, please call Metro Crime Stoppers at 1-866-7-LOCK-UP or contact our homicide unit at 410-396-2100. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And now we'll take questions.
Mr. Mayor, you know from spending so much time in Park Heights, how are you? So many buildings have placards on them with X's that mark them as unoccupied. I don't know if this is a question for you or Chief Ford, but how recently or is that program even still going on? Is that helpful for firefighters? It probably wouldn't have mattered in this situation necessarily a week ago today, but is that something you're thinking about bringing back? And what's the importance of signifying that a house is at least in theory unoccupied?
Yeah, there's actually, and great question, there's actually a new program. I'll actually let the commissioner talk about the vacant QR codes that are put on the houses. And I'll let the fire chief talk about what his women and men and the decisions that they have to make when they're fighting a fire in a vacant structure. But we know that we have many vacant homes. As you know, I grew up with many of them in Park Heights. We're now excited to see redevelopment starting in Park Heights, right? But we have to have that happening continuously around the city so there are less and less vacancies. It is important, as the commissioner said, to note that we're on track to have the least amount of vacancies in the city in decades, but it's still not enough for me. Madam Commissioner, I'll go to you first and then the Chief Ford.
So on the vacant buildings across the city, you will see the white placard with lettering that identifies it as a vacant property, as well as the QR code where any resident can go and look up specific information about the owners of that property. You also will see sometimes the vacant property placard also with the red X's that were identified, and I'll let Chief Ford speak more about that. But that is one of the items that Chief Ford and I have discussed as recently as this morning, and one of the things that our teams will be looking at and reviewing over the next couple of weeks as well in terms of coordinating that response to assist in any way possible that we can from our staff to help him and his firefighters as they combat fires across the city.
So you're right. I don't know if a placard would have mattered in this situation. That situation, actually, we have committees together to investigate, and as all fire deaths, they'll be investigated by an organization called NIOSH. In respects to the X's, we moved from using X's on the buildings to having CAD information that actually comes directly out when people are responding. It's sent from dispatch directly to the mobile data terminals, the MDTs, and at that point they can receive a great deal of that information. But even at that being the case, we are reevaluating that process. As the commissioner stated, along with her team, we're evaluating how we can do this more effectively to make sure we dispose our officers to as much, and I mean our officers like lieutenants and captains that are in charge on the scene, to expose them to as much information as possible so they can make responsible decisions or informed decisions. That would be a better statement, informed decisions when they get on the scene. And we're looking at other agencies and trying to evaluate best practices. I spoke to the fire chief of FDNY this morning, Philadelphia, and DC. And I focused on them intentionally because northeastern cities have some of the same problems we have with vacancies. In fact, Philadelphia said that in particular. And the other organization we're looking at in particular is St. Louis, because St. Louis recently had an issue that a fighter that died in eerily the same circumstances. And we're looking at some of the policies they put in place.
Dave?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. As far as rescue plan funds, how much money are you willing to commit, and where would the money go? And part two of my question, what type of legislative changes will help?
Well, I think this is, stay tuned on the ARPA funds. Good try, Dave. I think I can't knock you for trying. But on the legislative front, we're going to be working with our partners. This group is going to be looking at that, and we'll be working with our partners in the council and in the legislature, if necessary, in the State House to see what kind of changes. This is about pulling together all of these ideas and things, in many cases that probably have been discussed but never together as a unit. This is about pulling the entirety of city government together to focus on this issue from top to bottom. Emily?
Hi there. I was wondering if there's any kind of do not enter list that's been compiled by housing, and any kind of conjunction between the fire department and the housing department in terms of giving them guidance on like which homes absolutely shouldn't be, entered by firefighters.
Within the CAD, we have certain structures that are considered unsafe, and we have policies on that. And that's even something we're looking at for best practices and updates.
And that's being routinely updated still at this point?
It should be, but we're trying to evaluate how recently it's been updated.
Alexa?
Hi, a couple of my questions already asked. More of a broad stroke question that I have. How many vacant structures can the city take down right now, and where are we with that? In a week, 2 weeks, next month?
So I'll let the commissioner talk about that, Alexa, but when we're talking about demolition, there's city demolition, we have a partnership with the state, Project Core. This is a big thing, and there's court processes that have to happen before you can get there. This is why we're talking about this from the top to bottom. This isn't a flip the switch kind of thing. I actually met with the state housing secretary on Friday to talk about our great partnership. Secretary Holt, for my money, is the best partner that we have in state operational government, and we're going to continue to work with him. I'll let Commissioner Kennedy talk about the details of demolition and how those happen and what has to happen before we can demolish a property.
So as Mayor Scott identified in his remarks earlier, the significant percentage of vacant properties in the city of Baltimore are privately owned properties. So in order to undergo demolition, there's a significant amount of due process that goes into that to get a property onto the demolition list. Our staff here, Deputy Hustler is here with me today, Deputy Booker is here with me today on our code enforcement and legal services team to look at that. We have a demolition pipeline in place. We are actively demolishing properties as the crews are out, and they've been out in different areas around the city over the last couple of weeks. We've had some, as well as an emergency demolition happen. We were in the pipeline for the fiscal year of this fiscal year, had roughly around 250 to 265 demolitions identified for this fiscal year. We have to get the updated list. We've had some delays on that due to court closures and some other components there. But we do everything in our capability with the budget that we have and the processes in place to take down buildings as swiftly as we can, given the complexities of what it takes in being able to demolish a privately owned vacant.
My other question's for the police commissioner, if I may. With the recent violence that we've had this month, a number of the homicides have been random violence, if I believe, in receiving word from the department. So we have Chesley Patterson, Fells Point, James Blue, the husband of the police lieutenant. That randomness adds a level of fear within the community. Can you speak to that and what the department is doing to address it?
Well, I will say the majority of the violence that we've been seeing are based on conflicts that recently exist or go back some time, and people are solving their conflicts with violence. I would not classify them at all as random. Some individuals were targeted, and some were just part of conflict. And there are some that we don't have the motive yet. So it would be ill-advised for me to say that they were random if we don't have the motive. And so I won't commit to that because we don't, on some of them, we don't have the information.
The two examples I just named, they were not random?
You talked to, well, I wouldn't call it random. Individuals are going after people they know or they know about in some fashion. So I'm not prepared to say that they're random because there's not enough information to support that they were random. Some individuals were targeted. So it's not random across the city. What I can tell you is that the Baltimore Police Department is always working on the most exhaustive deployment strategy to put officers in as many places as we can, to deter as much of it as we can, and are working around the clock to apprehend these individuals so that we can hold them accountable. And my message and our message to them is if violence is the life you choose, then we're going to make sure prison will be the price you pay.
Thank you. Dave?
Would someone please just give us an update on locating the person of interest in that fire? What's the status of the investigation? I know ATF is the lead agency, but you working in concert with them?
No update. As soon as we have the latest information we can share, we will share it with you, Dave.
But, I mean, the person, is a name associated with this individual? Is he
No,
from the neighborhood?
no
or
change.
something?
The information that was given from ATF that we all put out is the information that we have. We're going to let them work the case, and we will find that person. We want anyone that has information to let them and us know. Emily?
I guess for Commissioner Kennedy, we run into
Dag, Paul, you just jumped in front of Emily. She was standing there.
jockeying for a little position here. You got time for everyone, don't you, Mr. Mayor? For Commissioner Kennedy, so many of these vacant buildings are opened up, boards pried off. Is this kind of like a game of whack-a-mole? How does your agency tackle, because I was on Gilmore on Friday, entire blocks set for demolition, almost every one of them open air, boards pried off. Can you speak to the challenge of that and what you want residents to do if they see that?
So access to vacant properties is a challenge. Our code enforcement team and under Deputy Booker is out on a regular basis. They do regular routine inspections as part of their daily inspection routes, looking for any open vacant building, any potential structure that might look like it is needing to be evaluated by our buildings inspections team around potential for emergency demolition. They evaluate both the front and the rear, basement windows, front doors, front windows on the first floor to evaluate what, if anything, needs to be done in terms of putting in an additional internal work order that goes and works with our partner, DPW, to help to board and clean those properties where they're found to be open. It is a challenge. We have inspectors on the ground every day, and they're regularly doing this as part of their routine. If you are a citizen and you are in your community and you see a board that has been pried open, or if you see a window where the board fell off, or a basement window or a back window off of an alley, please call 311 and report that address. And that report goes out, that SR goes out, and our team immediately prioritizes those SRs for review.
And Emily, sorry, before, I just wanted to uplift that our code enforcement team is one of the best in the country. And I'm not just saying that because Deputy Commissioner Booker is here, and the work that him and Deputy Hessler do on the legal side, they work these things each and every day. Actually, when we were on scene, Deputy Booker was on scene, Deputy Hessler was virtual, but they were working to get us the information that we needed to be able to do what was needs to be done. They do that each and every day. Our code enforcement inspectors are out each and every day. They had visited this property just a few weeks before. They will continue to do their work. This is about how we can support them in that work. Emily gets the last question.
Councilman Dorsey recently suggested that the Stricker Street property could have been hit with a $900 failure to abate citation. He said that he didn't feel like enough of these were being issued. Is that something that you feel like should have been issued to this property? And is it something you would you look to expand with this review?
Well, a part of the review is how we can use the tools that we have better. As you know, I was around when we went to the $900 citation model as a council member. I don't know in this case if this would be the case because, as I said, Emily, and my memory serves me correct, this property was looked at from an inspector on the 4th of January, and they found it to be clean and boarded for all intents and purposes. It did not meet the requirements for that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.